Yo, how's it going? My name's Sam. If you don't already know me, I'm a sound designer and re-recording mixer or mix engineer who specializes in immersive audio and Dolby Atmos, as well as like headphone experiences, binaural Dolby Atmos. I'm just recording these live streams kind of as a way to have a library of stuff to look back on. Happy to answer any questions if you do join us live, but I'd assume we don't have a ton of people as of yet. Uh, but at the very least, these videos will serve as a great kind of like uh, full live recording of everything we're doing. Today, I'm going to be doing some live asset creation. Basically, just creating sound effects for a brand called Sonware or Son Sound, SAN Sound. They make spatial audio headphones and wireless IEMs or in-ear monitors. And I've had the opportunity to create a fair amount of their sound effects. We had worked on a few videos in the past. And yeah, so gonna get right into it. At the moment, we are working on the sound for when you put the headphones in. They just released these hardwire headphones that plug directly into your gaming console or phone. They also have wireless ones, but these assets are going to be directly for that whole ecosystem. So let me just break down kind of what we did here. The headphones are what they call planar dynamic. So they're kind of a mix between planar headphones and like hyperdynamic drivers. So they have really, really, really good bass response, um, which is great to hear. So we kind of wanted all of these assets to focus on kind of that 40 to 120 hertz, so super low thumpy sounds. And I kind of came up with this little heartbeat asset, right? So I have this little 40 hertz thump, which we created in Faceplant, of course, because I create pretty much everything in Faceplant. Let's wait for this to load up there. So I'm literally just taking a sine wave with a little operator here, um, a FM operator, a little tiny triangle wave here, or saw wave rather. That's just doing a little bit of FM modulation to get it a little more spiky in the ear. And then you will also see I have an envelope here, which is basically just volume automation that has a quick transient. And then we're also using a curve here to modulate that level going into this. Basically, I'm just taking a sine wave and doing a little kind of kick drum thing, sending it through some distortion, a compressor to kind of even out the sound, take away some of the peaks, and or rather let the peak through and then give us a little more sustain. And then also doing a nonlinear filter just to add some more distortion there. And that's our, little, actually, if I solo this, right, that's what it started as, our little 40 hertz thump. So I'm going to hide that and make it inactive again. Basically, I just committed that to a track and then am throwing it through Magma BB tubes, which is, again, saturation. And then the rest of this sample, you'll hear some more like reverberant low end sound. That's actually a couple of these. If I make these tracks larger again, I took a canvas painting, and attached a contact mic and like thumped it with a rubber mallet, I think, or like the palm of my hand. Can't remember which one I used, but it's giving that like super low bass note. So I have the kind of transient bass note of the 40 hertz thump, and then I have the like really, really low end and a little more real sounding because it's an actual recording, right? And then again, I'm throwing that through a little compression with a slow attack on this compressor. 7 is the fastest. So I'm letting the transient through and then holding on the compression to get a little more tail end out of it. And then sending both of them through a Pro Q that just focuses on that low end. And that was kind of the low end part. And then we had a little chordal thing going on right here, which again is just a phase plant patch. Super simple. A lot of times with asset creation, like the more simple you can make something, the better. This actually, I think, started as a preset, and I've changed it a little bit, but that's what it started as. It actually didn't have this group down here, or oops, it didn't have this group. So it was just super low notes. So I added an octave to give a little more high end because San, the company I'm doing these for, wanted a little more sparkle, a little more high end, which I get. So, and then I'm throwing that through Soothe. This is actually a sidechain Soothe, so if I play everything back, it's taking out some of the low end from other stuff. And then I'm throwing it through Magma BB tubes and kilohertz formant filter on a ah sound. Copy this so I don't lose it. A formant filter is great because you can change the vowel of something. And because the company's name is San, we wanted a ah sound. So the idea being a little heartbeat into a San, 3 beats, all because San is 3 letters, trying to get that branding just right. So we have San instead of, a little less bright. And then we mute that again. And one of the hardest parts of this asset was the fact that it needs to be mono because this is actually going directly into a little cortex in the headphone, which doesn't have that much space to actually store assets or sound assets. So trying to imitate a more immersive audio it was a big challenge. I initially tried a bunch of like Haas effect, which is where you basically add a delay, very, very short delay with no feedback, and you end up with phase cancellation in weird ways. And if you move that a lot, it can give the impression of movement forward and back and up and down without having 2 channels of audio, So instead, I think it was doing a little too much, didn't have the clarity I needed. So I opted for something similar. We're doing phasing and flanging. This is a great little plugin, by the way. It's called Kaleidoscopes. I think it's by Andrew Sheps and Waves. I love it because you can modulate what's going on here by the input, which is kind of like a fun little sidechainy thing that would take a while to set up in something like Faceplant, but I can just do it really quickly in here. And this is kind of my mix bus up here, global processing. I'm sending all of this into this grouped track here, and then so that's doing our movement based on the audio. A little bit of convolution reverb, which I am actually automating. If we pull up our automation lanes here, I'm just modulating the dry wet to come in slowly to give the impression and then go away. So it's giving the impression that it gets further away and comes back, even though it's just a mono asset. Um, and then a little bit of glue compression, really important whenever you're making an asset, that it all sounds cohesive. So it's literally taken off like half a dB, I think, 2 dBs, but it glues everything together. And then throwing it through an awesome plugin called Uber Loud for a little bit of multi-band kind of limiting compression. It's a maximizer. I'm also denoising a little bit. And then the thing that's doing all the heavy lifting is the Pro L2 by FabFilter. And that's taken off 5.3 dB, so I can push it even further and get the volume up. You can see over here on our little loudness visualization here that it's hitting around minus 12 LUFS, which is pretty loud for an asset like this. Sometimes you mix them, closer to like minus 14 or minus 16, which is like radio broadcast level. A film would be mixed at around minus 23 LUFS, minus 24, depending on the spec. So yeah, this just helps us get it loud. And that's the whole asset. It's super simple. Again, not trying to do too much. And I think, I've already shipped that and, bounced it and everything. So our next step is creating another asset. And I think I've got a note pulled up here. Yeah, so the notes here, pairing. So the pairing sound, when it pairs to the phone, we need to touch on. The off sound, mute, unmute. I think we're going to start with unmute because it's one that I've gotten a little direction on already. And we're going to try to recreate like a haptic. I don't know if you've ever heard of haptics, but like on your phone, haptic feedback is that buzz that you feel. And we're going to try and replicate that somehow in like an auditory way. Also kind of in the low range here, like our thump. So we're just going to try a bunch of stuff. Like I said, this takes time and a lot of trial and error, but let's go ahead and get into it. So I think I want to start in phase plant again. So I'm going to bring up a stereo instrument track, and we'll call it haptic. What's our unmute? And we're going to probably start with some Sanken 100K recordings, which is a microphone that records up to 100 kilohertz. So it's really good for slowing things down and getting some interesting sound design out of with no quality loss. And we'll probably try that in like a granular setting. So let's pull up phase plant. And we're going to send this straight to bus 3 for now, which is my little, actually, no, we're going to send it to its own little group. So in Pro Tools, you can pull up a routing folder, which is an awesome kind of little folder to route to sum all your audio to. And we can make that mono and call it asset 3, because this is the third asset I've created. I do have this in a Dolby Atmos project. That's why it defaults to a bed at the moment, because some of these assets I'll be designing in binaural Dolby Atmos. For now, though, we're just going to send this straight to my output here, but still a mono kind of summing track here, because I'm pretty sure this also needs to be in the firmware of the headphone, so it needs to be a small file size. And we're going to try out a granular patch to start. So I'm going to pull up Soundly. Oh shit. You can see I was working on a uh, a project earlier. I'm trying to find a tab here that I can delete. I think this one's all right. So let's pull up 100K low, see what that pulls up. So I'm looking for like a very low frequency kind of rumbly sound that we can throw through some granular processing. That's kind of cool. I don't think it's going to work, but we can try it. So we just drop it into the granular engine. And you'll notice that this project is actually synced with beats and time because I kind of wanted all of this to sync up with a beat, especially for the heartbeat on this past asset. So we're going to try that on this again and see if we can keep the same BPM for all of these assets, which if we take a look up here, we're at 193, which is fast, but it, for our purposes, it makes sense. So I'm just going to drop a note in here, and you can already hear the granular stuff going to work. What a granular engine does is it's just going to, oops, we're going to solo out this, and actually we can just mute the whole tonal asset up there, and we can even collapse the folder so it's not getting in our way. Yeah, so a granular engine is going to take little tiny pieces of your sound and split them up into a ton of individual pieces and play them back in interesting ways. It's a great way to get rhythmic elements as well as if you're wanting to get like the timbre of something, but it's a super short tonal asset, you can just take a little piece and it'll play it over and over again, and you'll get that timbre. So let's just try some stuff. Add a little more attack so we're not. Yep. And the magic happens when you start moving your grains around where the positions start. So we're going to sync this up again with the beats here. We're going to go 1/4 for now. That's pretty fast. Maybe a half note. So 2/4. And sync that up with the position here. So we have way too many grains, and what you can do is sync this with the beat, which is what I'm trying to do here. And then we're going to make our grain envelopes super short. And we're going to make this one 1/16. So I'm trying to get that like stuttery, glitchy thing going. And we're going to make this a whole note. And might as well just modulate the whole thing. Right? And first thing I like to throw stuff through, and again, this is a super simple patch. We might do a warm start, which is meaning it's already cycling the grains. See, without warm start, a little less immediate impact. So there's that. We could try a little envelope here and really stretch the time out to around 1 second. So we know for this asset, it needs to be half a second. So attack, super short. And maybe our sustain is much longer. So let's go here and find exactly 1 second or thereabouts, or half a second, as close as we can get. So this project is at 24 frames a second, 23.976, and assets starting at around 405. So I just want to get close to half a second. So let's cut our note off here. Pretty good. And release a little longer, and that just gives us a little tail on the audio. So now let's start getting into some design here. First thing I always like to start with is a little bit of saturation, soft clipping. This will just even the sound out a little bit, give us a little distortion. Yep. And then I really want to take an audio follower and modulate some stuff from that. It's going to give us that kind of doom, doom, doom sound I'm looking for. So first things first, let's take a nonlinear filter and attach it to here. And that's going to cut off some of our high end, as well as make it feel like it's moving a little more. And then let's take a disperser. Disperser is going to basically phase twist the signal. It's going to apply weird phase things to the low end compared to the high end, and you end up with this kind of like, if you move it, if it's stable, you just have a bit of a dispersion of the phase as you go up. But if you move it with something like this, you end up with that kind of weird like warping sound. And I use it a lot. And pinch is just going to make that more pronounced. We don't want it to be way overboard here. So we're going to take the amount down a bit. Then just 3-band EQ. And really I'm looking for 1, 2, 3 again to represent the san, 3 letters. So we can try to dial that in. Down here underneath our granular engine, these are all of our random modulators. So just a little bit of random positioning and timing will help it feel a little less stilted. And you can change the pitch up, almost up or down 2 semitones. We don't want to do that much, but just a little bit gives us a little more character. Reverse is pretty interesting. So 100%, that means all of our grains are going to be reversed. 0 is forward. In this case, I kind of like forward. Also, on a grain envelope, if you make your handles here shorter, you'll get more of a kind of glitchy, impacty sound. Yeah, there we go. Maybe just a little more. Yeah, there we go. And then I'm going to try some sort of modulation that changes with our sound. So on another audio follower, we can try like a comb filter at kind of around our range, our low end range here. And I'm going to try another audio follower. Yeah, it might not sound great. We'll see. Nope, too much of a phase change. I'm looking for more of a thump than anything. So let's try getting a compressor to dial in that. Actually, before a compressor, we're going to take a transient shaper and get this attack up. And pump is going to, basically attack is going to add more transient. It's kind of uncompressing. And then pump is going to make the decay right after that attack more pronounced, which is what we want. We'll make it slow though. There we go. So I'm just taking the sustain down a little bit so we get less tail end. And you end up with a very kind of low end frequency focus. And then we're going to take a compressor and kind of same deal. We're going to make the attack really slow and the release also fairly slow. And you can see that's our gain reduction. So basically I'm just letting the transient poke through. At about a 4-to-1 ratio, and then we can make up gain. Yeah. And then we're going to throw it through some distortion. Nope. Going to filter first. This time not a nonlinear filter. I'm going to do some sound design with a Q, which is your resonance peak on a filter. There we go. So I really want this to be our like haptic low end thing going on without much else. We can try. And then if we take another audio follower, actually we can probably just use this fast one. And that's going to give us a little more movement of that peak. Not sure if I love that. I wish this filter had a mix knob on it. But that is the sound I'm going for, so we're going to keep it. And then if we distort it, now we're really just distorting that low end to then give us a little more high end, if that makes sense. Oh. Also gonna send this to bus 3 because that is what's gonna send audio to our little visualization down here. So you can see the difference between that's what we started with, and this is gonna level it out a little. And as we add more distortion, you add more high end because you're creating upper harmonics, right? You can see we poke up a little further into the low end. Just gonna do a bit of that. And now we can play around with like, what if we just did eighth notes? Don't love it? No warm start. Align the phases. Yeah, I don't hate that. And then where you can start to get scale is in things like Convolver, where we can take some, I really like a live room for a lot of assets because it's like this big, like I use this word all the time, but it's cavitaceous, I think. Turn the gain down. And I'm just dialing in the time here. And then we can take our mix down. And I just realized I'm in a stereo faceplant. So we're going to copy the settings and go mono. It's just muscle memory. I created a stereo faceplant. Haptic unmute. We'll make this. Oh. And then gotta load a new instance of faceplant. Mono. And now we can paste these settings and see what it sounds like in mono for real. Yeah, a little strange. So maybe we'll take our filter up. And what I might do here instead, we can go back and just save that in case we want to go back. We'll just add 2 filters. One to take some of this high end off with a pretty harsh slope. Maybe not. There we go. And then one we're going to do on like a bell curve to give us that resonance peak. I want around 100 and there it is, right there. And it's helpful to do that sometimes when you're mixing into the convolver. And if we add a little delay before the convolver, that's where we start to get that like space between and a little phase cancellation in some places. Thinking right around here. Feedback is going to feed back some of that audio into the convolver, similar to what you see on a delay. Yeah. And then you can change the tone. Kind of like it just where it was. So I think we're getting just a little too much drive here. Because I do want this to still be focused on the low end so we can... So let's hear the filter originally and what we have now. I think I prefer what we have now. Yeah, nice. And then I think we're about done in faceplant, and now I'll do some, hold on. Yeah, and now I'll do some processing kind of globally. Wow, haven't even been listening to the correct one. Ugh. You ever think that you know audio and then you start affecting the wrong one? Dang it. Yeah, so that's what we're sounding like. Don't love that. I prefer this one. Dang it. So let's try. So this is actually a stereo one summed into mono, which can introduce some phase problems, but So 3-band allows us to push into a limiter using like different bands, and you can kind of decide where those bands are. And then I love the distortion settings here. Push and stress. Just really, really good. And then the denoise on this is pretty good. If you just want some global denoise, especially when you're working with samples, sometimes noise can build up as you do that distortion, so it's nice to just bring it down a fair amount. But we got to bring the wet gain down even more. Yeah, and then sometimes you can throw it through a black box, which, if it would load, is a saturation plugin that doesn't add a lot of harshness, but can give you more perceived loudness without more peak loudness or peak metering. So you just say in, and this is kind of a mix knob. And then we can do a low focus. And you can hear that's way louder, but we're actually not clipping the mono as we were before. I'm really liking how that's sounding. And there's also an air feature. I don't use it a lot, but it is pretty good on occasion. So what we're going to do is commit that up to an insert and hide and make inactive the original phase plant. And it's probably good that we're doing this in stereo and summing it down to mono, because I don't know if this one is actually stereo or mono yet. But there you go. That's going to be one of our base layers. And then I would probably go in and affect this specific one globally. And with a little more control. I love Pro Q's dynamic processing, dynamic EQ. And usually on auto modes, it's pretty good at deciding what to push. And that's probably that for that specific asset. I wish it was a little more like 1, 2, 3, but what we can try is just cutting it off, seeing what happens. That's not bad. And you'll see I'm still working on the grid here as far as like in the musical grid rather than on, if I were to go to time code. Now I'm on a time code grid, but we want to keep it in musical because I kind of want all these synced to bars and beats. and all of the modulation we did in there was synced to bars and beats. So there's that one. Perfect. All right. So now let's go back and, we're trying to get like a haptic-y thing. So now let's go away from our 100K stuff and try like low rumble and see if we can't get something good. I wonder if I have any haptic stuff. Not what we're looking for. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but what I'm looking for here is timbre, and then we can do some granular stuff. That's not bad. I did some work for a film recently, if I can find it. Gosh, I don't know where it would be. I'm looking for this like really low end focused. Those aren't bad. That we can maybe turn into like a more timed asset, like 1, 2, 3. Where is it? Come on. They were like these sub bass rumbles. That might be what I'm looking for. And what we can do before taking this into phase plant or anything is do this, move this into here, send this and this to asset 3. I'm just routing it through the folder. You could do the same with a aux input, but this is just an easy workflow that allows you to quickly do things. And now we can send this through some crazy processing. New distort has so I'm looking for a saturation here. Let's try Berserk. That I can add a little more high frequency information as well as some like weird resonances, and then we can take that sample into phase plant and see what we can do with that. If my plugins would ever load. That's what I'm looking for. That little like crackle. Perfect. And then I want some more loudness out of it, so I'm going to throw it through an uber loud or a limiter or something. Just a little bit of denoise. get rid of some artifacts. And then we can take this, commit up to the insert, okay. And we hid and made inactive that original track, and now we have this, which I really like the timbre of. And if we highlight it in Pro Tools, it will pull it up in the right screen here, and I can say reveal in Finder, and there's that committed asset. And now we can mute this, pull up a phase plant instance. So again, we'll make it stereo. If I could click correctly, my goodness. And we'll say crackle haptic, because this is going to be kind of our mid-rangey thing that's going on. And again, we send this through asset 3. And we take this from Finder into our phase plant. First, I'm going to make it a granular generator again. Take this and throw it here. And now if we do this, I'm actually going to go straight to our output here. Yeah. And same deal here. We're going to move everything by the grid, so we can hopefully get like a 1, 2, 3 to stay in line with the brand. So we're going to say maybe another whole note, let's see, and modulate our position here. And again, these grains, watch, just for like demonstration purposes, this is what happens if you increase the grains. You can now get the timbre of something, and if I make this even longer, you can get the timbre of something without the time of something. So it's a really good tool for extending your library. But we're going to sync it to hertz, or to the grid. And I kind of like that 1, 2, 3. And again, we're going to make this the same length as the other one. Not quite fast enough, so we're going to say that's an 1/8 note. Let's try a quarter. One, two, three. There it is. And I'm not going to do anything fancy on our envelope here this time. Just make the release a little longer. Lovely. And if we actually pull up a analog sine wave, what happens if we do a little FM modulation on the phase? So this is logarithmic phase, or FM. Yeah, I don't love it. I was hoping to get like a little bite on the top end of the waveform, but just isn't doing. So now let's try clipping this to start. So a clipper is basically a really extreme form of a limiter. And you can get some really interesting yielded results if we clip at the top and then just turn the gain up. That's way too loud. softer knee is going to allow you a little more grace on the artifacts. Not sure if we want that here. And then we're going to take a really, really accentuated filter here. Because this is a do, we're going to take another audio follower. I use audio followers literally all the time. They're very, very useful. And you can go on the cutoff here. Exactly what we want, but we're going to start it like right at the bottom. And then turn this gain down. Oh yeah, right there. And this is just, we're focusing on the low end and the mid range right now, which is why I'm doing all of these crazy filters to filter out the high end, because I just want a couple layers of that haptic-y goodness. I still feel like it's not quite good enough on the like cavitaceous sound I'm going for here. So we're going to take a convolver really early this time and see if we can't find like, yeah, this one. This is a really short convolution. It's an old sedan and we can make it even shorter. So it's a super, super short reverb basically. But if I feed back into it, and then I can make the tone a little brighter or a little darker. Yeah, there it is. And then we take our mix down. And now if we take another audio follower, we can modulate the mix to go up on that. I want it to end at around 30. But if we go like this, I know kind of where 30 is, and then gain it up. And then attack super short, so I'm getting those big peaks. And hopefully that just adds to that kind of spatial thing I'm going for. Another thing that's good to know, if you take a ring modulator and you take it down to 10 hertz, it kind of acts as a tremolo type deal. I don't love it in that case, but you can do that, or you can take a transgate on 3s. This is basically, if you've ever heard of tremolator from Sound Toys, this can yield similar results. And then our resolution is going to be much slower. And that gives us our 1, 2, 3. I want attack to be super short, decay to be a little longer. And then release pretty short. What you can do then is send directly into some sort of distortion. I'm going to say, we take, so a wave shaper is just a way of doing distortion or wave shaping where your input doesn't match your output, basically. So you can take a simple one like let's Try convex. Nope. Kind of just want a normal, yeah, soft clip of some sort. Dang it. And then way less drive. Yeah, that's pretty good. But then you can take the mix down on this. I'm not quite hearing the 1, 2, 3, so we're going to try on a different beat. Getting it better there. Let's try this one. There it is. Boom, boom, boom. Nice. And then we can try a disperser. It's always good to just give it a go, see what it sounds like. Sometimes it's just way too much. In this case, though, it works. I'm going to do a different audio follower, though, because this one's too fast, I think. Or too slow. We'll see. Too slow. So we're going to take another audio follower. Again, super simple faceplant patches here, but they're effective, I think. You know, you can get lost in the weeds in faceplant pretty easily. So this one, we're actually going to modulate based on our input to lane 2. And you'll notice that my other ones are modulating based on master. So as this does the wub wub thing, then that's going to affect how it modulates our other filters. So release is not fast enough. Kind of wish I could compress this. I don't love that. So maybe this one's also on master. So it's kind of feeding back into itself like the others. It's not bad. Let's now just destroy that. Throw it through a whole bunch of stuff. So before we do uber loud, I'd like to throw something like another black box on there to get a little bit of distortion. Just grab a cup of coffee real quick. So you can get a little distortion, a little more peak value for less. Alt tube, by the way, is a pentode tube, which is a little harsher. And here adds a little more of that, like odd saturation, which is a little less pleasing to the ear because it's dissonant, but it is harsher, which is kind of what we're going for. I'm going to go here, and I think the release is too fast on this envelope. Yeah, there we go. That was the thing that was hitting my ear wrong. So that'll do some work kind of leveling out our sound a little bit. And then I might try this is my favorite convolution reverb. It's called Chameleon Surround, and it works for surround as well. but it also works in just normal stereo or mono. Again, I'm sending this stereo signal to a mono bus at the moment, which can run into some like phase problems, but I don't know which way I want this sound to go yet. So it'll be fine. So let's try something like a toilet cubicle. Nope. Domestic bathroom. I'm looking for like small kind of sounds that can impart some of their character, but if we take the dry wet down, that's not bad. Inside a glass jar, that's hilarious. If I stretch it a bit, we can get it closer to like a larger sound. That's kind of what I'm looking for. And now we're clipping. Eh, I don't love it. I don't love this at all. So we're just going to maximize and see what we can do with the multiband compression here. So I don't think we're going to push the low a lot here. Still something hitting my ear wrong. Maybe it's the grain envelope. It needs to be. Yep. Forgot to change the grain envelope. So changing your grain envelope is basically your in and out for each grain. And something more like this is going to result in a smoother, less transient sound, right? Which is not what we want in this case. I want something like, and let's make our grain envelope shorter. Right there. See, that's hitting my ear way better now. And sometimes it does help to send into an uber loud or something like that. So I'm basically just trying not to clip now. So that's pretty good. We can go ahead and commit that, hide and make inactive the original faceplant. You can see over here on the left here, my process is a lot of just kind of linear from this to that, from this to that, especially for asset creation. That makes a lot of sense to me. So here's not quite half a second. It's a little longer. So what we can do, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. I really like the timbre of it. We can make it shorter. There's a lot of ways to do so. So now let's hear everything in context. Don't love this, but we can try, if we go to warp mode here. Oh, I have to enable elastic audio. Probably polyphonic is what we're looking for here. We'll see. Warp mode allows you to change the length of things. Now it's downsampling, so that's something you gotta kind of keep in mind. And we're gonna be off of the grid now, but sometimes it's, you can take a look. And you can kind of eyeball it and see where it lines back up on the grid. So if we move it all the way back to here, that's pretty close. to being on the grid again. Don't hate that. Turn this one down. And I can make this a little sooner because I'm moving it with the grid. And then delete that because I have layered editing on. Yeah, it's does hurt the timbre a little bit. So what I want to do is should have done this beforehand, but here we go. Undo that, and then you can say duplicate main playlist. That's Pro Tools playlisting feature, which allows you to make basically different versions of one track. And I can always go back to that. And the way you look at that, you go playlists, control, command, back, by the way, or forward, or arrow keys is what I'm hitting. Is what lets you change track modes like this. So playlist is how you see the old one. Right now that's just duplicated. But if I go back to my warp mode, we can change it to get on the grid again, or as close to the grid as we can get. Yeah, now we have a backup. If we decide to go back, oops. And I think that's a good starting point for this. Sometimes a good thing to try out is a little bit of side chaining from one to the other. So there's a couple different plugins that can do this. I'm going to try the new kilohertz compactor. You'll notice it looks very similar to Phaseplant, same company. You can load this in Phaseplant as well. But I can make the key input what I just assigned that bus. And now we're going to sidechain compress this original haptic thing from this source. So attack. I want this to be super fast. There we go. And then here's bypassed and width. And that's just going to duck this one out of the way of this one. Right? So, by the way, to get back to your original track layout, you just hit the minus button and you're back. Or you can just, oops. Oh, I hate it when I accidentally hit that key command. Or you can go command control arrow key to switch back. But for now, I just want to go back to waveform. And it's going to sound like that. And then hide and make inactive this original one. So I think that's a good starting point for this asset. We can try stuff, you know, like going back to warp mode on this track. And, oh, well, I need to enable elastic audio. Again, I think polyphonic works on this. We could try rhythmic, but I think polyphonic is probably what's going to work best here. And then I can move this one back as well to try and line it up with the new grid of this one. Hate it. One thing we can try though is go rhythmic on this track, see if it changes the sound. Yeah, polyphonic's way better. So 1, 2, 3 is what we're looking for. to be in line with kind of the brand of this company. So now let's focus on the mid-range. I'm gonna search for warp, or God, you can tell where my mind is. For morph, rather. Morph sounds. Try to find a good example. Yeah, stuff like this. If we go to boom 1. Stuff like that, with a lot of morphing phase stuff. And we're just looking for like a quick rhythmic mid-range thing. If I could isolate the mid-range on that, that might be good. Cool little trick here. It's an expensive trick, unfortunately. But we can take this, make it medium, send it to the correct bus here, asset 3. And then if you take Soothe, which really expensive plugin, but I mean, I use it for the side chaining capabilities all the freaking time. But one of the coolest things you can do with it is the delta mode. And it will selectively take resonances from specific frequency ranges. Right, so you can take just a mid-range peak from something. I don't know if I love it on this one, but it's a good little trick to know how to do. Go ahead and delete that though. So maybe we can add a click to this search. That's pretty good. Little granular rain stick thing. So what you can try, again, you go to Elastic Audio. This time we're going to do Varispeed, which leans into the pitch shifting that happens when you're changing samples. And if we go back to warp mode and extend it, right, it's going to be much lower notes. And I don't love this, but it's worth a try. And then, you know, if we just hit dash or minus, come back to our original. Yeah, that's not great. Could try a little Pro Q, filter out what we don't want. And right now I'm listening to all 3 from this asset. Let's try steeper curves, 24. Yeah, I don't hate that. A little morphing thing going on. Doesn't quite fit with our haptic. So let's mute it for now and try and find some sort of rhythmic low end. Ooh. So these won't be directly in time, but we can use our warp modes again to get it in time. These are really good. Yeah, so they're very low frequency, but we can change that. Again, sending it to the same folder. Not bad. But let's enable warp modes again. This one is definitely going to work rhythmically. And then if we add some warp points here, you can also do that in analysis mode, but this seems to be what works pretty well. Now we can change where these are. Might really change the timbre, which is the only thing I'm most concerned about. That's pretty good. And then we can take this back. So that's now on grid. We gotta get everything else on grid. And I'm just sticking with the same tempo that I did for that previous asset, because I want some like cohesion between these assets. You'll have to excuse my coffee habit. Yeah, so let's fix this. First thing, oh, damn it, is make this fade way shorter. And then we go back to our warp mode. And now we're actually just gonna place some warp points. Kind of where they start. I don't know why it does this sometimes. User error for sure, but I am in warp mode, polyphonic. Yeah, on this one it let me drag the warp points like this. And of course now it does. Much better. I love this double hit here. Maybe, so if you go to analysis mode, now you can just drop more markers in. And move them. I guess it's the fade that's tripping this thing up. All right. Delete the fade for now. And also minus will just take you to volume like that. Yeah, it's just not going to let me do it. I really know why. Pretty close. We can drag that. Yeah, I don't really care if it creates, it's because I was on grid mode, duh. We're just going to take the beginning to there, and then again, you hold Control plus to add another warp point. I hate that it drags it really shouldn't drag the whole start. There it is, because I had it selected. And now I can move this. Sorry about that. And now this is a high speed zone, which always sounds horrible. So what we can do is go into slip mode, cut it off right there, add a little fade, and not include that. Better, but still not loving what it's doing to the sound. There we go. I don't hate that. So now we can go back to waveform, and that's kind of our little haptic thing. Still love a little mid-range thing, so let's see if we can't find some sort of mid-range wobble. Looking for more of a you'll see that I use a lot of Boom 1 stuff. Really, really high quality. Maybe we could try like a little tonal thing. And send that back to our folder track. So we're going to go back into grid mode. And try and end these on grid. Don't like the tonal thing. This is a tough one. That might be it. I'm gonna go ahead and add these to Soundware collection. Some sort of rhythmic tonal thing. See if we can link it up actually to the grid. Send it to our asset 3 here. And then make it huge and see how it lines up. Pretty close. I mean, it's not going to sound good here. Yes. All right. That's that mid-range kind of tonal thing I was looking for. And sometimes I check it on different speakers just to see what it sounds like. MacBook Pro speakers actually sound pretty dang good. And I found can translate, except not below 100 hertz, but everything else pretty good. That's definitely way too many clicks though. So again, we're gonna just use warp modes a lot. This is somewhere in between polyphonic and rhythmic. We'll try polyphonic to start and just get this to sync up with the grid. Pretty easy actually, a lot of times. And one too many here. Let's try that. Let's try rhythmic. I don't love what it's doing to the timbre. Yeah, it kind of takes some life out of it. But if we make this more of like a build and release thing, that works pretty well. I like it. Now I'm sensing a little bit of built up low end. So I'm actually going to do something similar to what we did with our compactor here on this haptic and make this more of a mid-range thing. So this time we do it with Soothe. And what you can do is home in on just the 20 hertz to, like 100 hertz range at a peak there, and take this filter down, and then send, we'll go bus 12, which I use as my key input, and then sidechain it. And soloed, and you can see it takes that peak away. That is way too much though, and too sharp. Just gonna do soft attack, instant release, like a little longer. I don't actually love that. Let's add some saturation here. Maybe like sometimes Abbey Road saturator. By Waves is really good for getting that like mid-range poke. It has a pretty harsh ceiling, so if you drive it too hard, you get into like really intense distortion and kind of like crackly sounds. So we're gonna have to come on, Waves. Waves Ultimate is great, but it Pro Tools doesn't like it. It takes forever to load the plugins when you have every single Waves plugin. There we go. See what I'm saying? It immediately gets into that like crackly stuff if driven too hard. But sometimes I really like it because it has this compactor feature, or compander, not compactor, which is a compressor mixed with like an expander, which sounds counterintuitive, but it sounds pretty good. And then you can feed certain frequencies into it. I don't like it on this specifically. Let's try Magma BB tubes. I'm just looking for a little more mid-range punch. I know what it needs. Transient shaper. We did this in Faceplant, but we haven't done it on the whole thing. All right. By the way, here's another quick trick for Pro Tools. If you create a master fader track, it's a great gain staging tool. So we can call it asset 3 and then assign it to our bus here for asset 3. And now this allows me to control the input into this bus here. Great gain staging tool. Rather than changing the volume on all of these, I can just change how much is going in here. And then let's just try, what's it called? UID SSL G-Bus compressor. This is a glue compressor. And I really like this setting. Nope, wrong one. Gentle mix bus. This is a super slow attack, fast release, very low ratio, just a tiny bit. Of bus compression. And then some sort of uber loud 3-band push. Yeah. Don't love it so far. And the last thing I want to try is, let's go back to our tonal asset 2, get a little bit of cohesion here, duplicate our active and duplicate the 40 hertz thump that I made a couple days ago. And we bring it into here, send it to our bus, and then make a third bump in our 40 hertz thing, and then hide and make inactive again, and get close that folder up. So now if we take a listen to our thump, commit up to that insert, and we hid and made it inactive again. And then we're just going to take Magma BB tubes here and copy the settings from it, because I kind of want the same exact sound here that we did on our previous asset. Now I paste the settings. I just don't love it. I think it's maybe just a little behind. So we're gonna yeah. Don't love what we've done here. I'm going to try one thing, and rather than sending everything to a mono, we're going to send it to stereo since we did everything. I'm kind of summing all this down to stereo, so I'm hoping that that will help the sound overall. Could hurt it though. So the way you do that, if you want to change your folder track, all you have to do is say move to top level. Where is that? Move to top level. That takes it out of the folder track. And then if you hold Option Shift, no output, then you just remove all the outputs. And then you can just quickly go move, new folder. We'll call this Asset 3B and make it a stereo routing folder this time. Create it. The nice thing about working in Faceplant though is, you know, if I do want to go back to mono, all I have to do is duplicate all those Faceplant tracks or copy the settings and then put them on a mono instance of Faceplant, and it still works just fine. So now we solo this track. Don't love it. Honestly, I prefer the mono. So we're going to hit Command Z, Command Z. And beautiful thing about Pro Tools is I can just now highlight all these, bus, asset 3. And we're back to this one. So let's try, before uber loud, I want a little bit more movement. So we're going to try kaleidoscopes like we did on our previous asset. Ooh, I like that. We're going to put both of these on an input modulator. I can click. Flangers basically duplicate the sound a few milliseconds after and can yield some really good results. And do less of our phaser here. I love also in kaleidoscopes you have a drive that you can do pre or post processing. All right, I don't hate that. I'm going to try a different speakers. Yeah, it's just this stuff isn't lined up. You hear that? Like it's slightly off, especially on this one. So we're going to try, again, I'm going really granular on this, trying to get it to sound good. Sometimes, you know, assets just don't work out and you got to move on to the next one. I'm also spending way too long on this, but here we are. So holding control on your warp markers allows you to then move them without changing things within the clip. Yeah, just not loving it. Everything just feels late, you know? But I did learn some stuff about kind of how to zero in on this original asset sound. So I'm trying to keep it as consistent with that as I can get. But sometimes assets just don't work out and you got to move on. So I think that's it for this stream. You know, I was way too granular on this asset, but that's kind of what I want to do with this, you know, with these streams is just show how much work goes into a single asset and kind of all the things you try. And a lot of times it doesn't work out. But you just got to keep at it because eventually you can refine down and refine down and refine down and find something that really does work. So still want to try one bounce on the headphones because sometimes at the end of the day I'm mixing 4 headphones. I don't quite yet have a copy of the headphones that I wanted to, you know, make these for. They're in the mail, I think. So eventually we'll try it on those. But I have another pair of Sonware headphones that are close-ish in, you know, tuned by the same person, so they're going to be close. So they sound good on my big monitors. I just don't love what's going on in the top end of the asset. So one thing I can try is doing a Pro Q and just rolling off some of that high end. We can also try that not globally, just on a track by track basis. We already did it here. So we can try it here. Go back to waveform. Yeah, I think it could use a little bit of tightening up. Another thing that can really help these to tighten up is just putting a 24 dB per octave high pass on the bottom, maybe 12, no, 24 at 20 hertz, because basically anything below 20 hertz is useless. All right, and we're clipping the track now. A little better. Same thing here. I do want to try one thing where I put a supercharger on this and do it in parallel. This is just a really good compressor for kicks. And you dial in like a really overcompressed thing, and then you just only do a little bit of it. That's fine. I think capitator. No. Pro Q. Just tighten up the low end. That's pretty good. Yup. And then it's also good sometimes to do linear phase on these low end ones. It can take a little bit of the punch out of it, but you'll run into a lot less phase problems. I actually don't like it here. Huh. You just run into pre-ringing, which is like a basically it's waiting a full cycle to apply the processing, which can result in some artifacts that are not great. But low end is such a long wavelength that sometimes you run into phase problems if you don't do linear phase. And then same thing here, tighten up the low end, maybe change the timbre a little bit. A lot of 20 hertz there. We're also clipping this track. So what I'm going to try and do, this is the last kind of resort. I'm going to do another compactor here. And use key input 13. Yeah, it's just not good. All right. Let's just try shipping that. And I'm actually also going to throw, that's only hitting 16 lufs, so we're going to go Fab Filter Pro L2. And I think probably all around. So integrated of around 13 lufs there. Look ahead is just takes a little more processing, but it does a better job at identifying what is going on in the transients. We want a slow attack, not that slow. A fast release. That's pretty good. And I dig that. And I'm just going to make the output level minus 0.1 just so we know we're not clipping. And that's pretty good. I actually like it a lot better once we have a Pro L2 on there. And then all you need to do to ship or to bounce something, select your region, bounce, tonal asset 3. You can see I was on a fair amount of revisions with that other one. At the very least, I can resample this one and work it in some way into this asset. As far as like time goes on these assets, you gotta really, weigh how much you're getting paid for the project to how much time you're putting into it. We've put 2 hours into this. That's probably too much for a lot of assets. But if the scope of the project is pretty big, these are going to be used on every pair of headphones. So it's worth it to me to spend the time and get them right. And you just slowly zero in on what works. So let's tonal asset 3. Another thing is I always add an MP3 with these sound effects and see how it sounds when it's super compressed, because sometimes they need to be depending on their use case. So this is a good kind of solution there. Pro Tools just automatically does it. See, and it'll bring up this dialog box. I usually put what kilobytes per second bit rate we're doing. In this case, 96 kbps. And then it bounces it. And I gotta switch to your 16 monitor. And now in software asset creation, we'll sort by date added. Here we are. I don't know if you can hear that. I don't have my whole system linked up to my God. Don't like this little mid-range thing. Oh well. I will probably make another one of these streams. Trying to zero in on this like haptic feedback thing I'm trying to do. Might take a while, but we'll get there. So if you did watch, thanks so much. And this will probably just stay up as a VOD. Maybe we'll see. So thank you for watching. If you did, it means a lot to me. And on Tuesday, so in 2 days, I have a awesome video coming out that I really can't wait for, with the French experimental filmmaker named Thomas Blancard. Just like rip your speakers, awesome. So looking forward to that. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.